Well, the desperate search for survivors is intensifying after a high-rise condo building collapsed in South Florida last week. Rescue crews from around the world are now digging through the rubble in Surfside, that is just north of Miami Beach. 4 more bodies were recovered yesterday, bringing the death toll to 9. More than 150 people are still missing. As we learn more about those lost, we are also learning more about what may have caused this tragedy. David Begnaud has the latest.
Right now, you've got teams from Israel and Mexico working with the team from the Miami-Dade County Fire Rescue. They're working 12-hour shifts, midnight to noon, noon to midnight. They're exhausted, they're tired, they are dispirited, if you will. They really want to find somebody alive. Officials keep telling us that. If you only knew how bad these guys want to find someone alive, you would understand why they are refusing to give up. But listen, you've still got victims' families that are saying not enough is being done fast enough. Can you imagine being someone who's missing a relative and you look at the site and you don't see what you believe is people moving with a sense of urgency? There are so many various emotions happening around here, but the bottom line is this is still an active search and rescue operation. They have not given up yet. We have been told repeatedly, rescuers are moving fast but carefully. One wrong move could mean another disaster.
We need to be sure that the pile does not fall on them, that it does not fall on any possible survivors.
What they've done is dig a trench beneath the rubble. So far, it's 125 feet long and 40 feet deep. There's an Israeli search and rescue team hoping to rescue people here just like they did after the 2010 Haiti earthquake.
We need more people down here.
That's when crews found people alive 8 days after the quake. Here on Sunday, for the first time, families of the missing were escorted to the disaster site. Meanwhile, this morning, there are questions that remain about the structural problems with this building. There was an assessment done by engineers in 2018, and one part took a look at the parking garage and found abundant cracking and spalling of varying degrees observed in the concrete columns, beams, and walls. Also in the report, though some of this damage is minor, most of the concrete deterioration needs to be repaired in a timely manner.
Absolutely. Why wasn't it? Timely can't possibly mean more than 2.5 years later.
That is attorney Brad Sohn, who is representing at least a dozen victims and was the first to file a lawsuit the day of the collapse.
The association knew or should have known that there were structural integrity problems. It should have been addressed at the time that they became aware.
Also in the report, this quote: the main issue with this building structure is that the entrance drive, pool deck, planter waterproofing is laid on a flat structure. There was no slope for drainage, so the water had to essentially evaporate.
We would have a lot of salt water.
William Espinosa was a maintenance manager here at the building in the late 90s.
Water would just basically sit there and then it would just seep downward. I would think, where did this water go? Because it had to go in through somewhere.
Listen, when he's talking about water, he said there would be a foot or two of water just sitting there with nowhere to go but down or evaporate. There was an engineer who we spoke with who took a look at the report who said nothing warned of imminent catastrophe in that report, and an attorney for the Homeowners Association said the same thing. There was nothing we read in there that told us, look, you need to get on repairs right away or this building is going to collapse. So the bottom line is most experts seem to be in agreement that there's not one single factor that led to the collapse. There's probably multiple factors that led to this building falling down in the middle of the night while people were sleeping. Anne-Marie, back to you.
All right, David, thank you. We are going to dig into that. Joining me now is Glenn Corbett. He is an associate professor of fire science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He is also a former member of the Federal Advisory Committee of the National Construction Safety Team. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. A federal probe into the cause of the collapse is being conducted by a team of scientists and engineers from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Tell me about this team. How was the team created, and what exactly will investigators be looking for?
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie, for having me on. It's hard to believe, actually, 20 years ago that if a building collapsed in the United States, we did not have the ability to do a full-scale investigation like we do for every plane crash in America. So back then, right after 9/11, Several family members, most notably Sally Reaganhard, who lost her probationary firefighter son that day, gathered together to create an organization called Skyscraper Safety, the Skyscraper Safety Campaign, which led to a push for a federal inquiry and actually led to the law that created the National Construction Safety Team, the group that is now down there in Florida to do the work. So it's really a legacy of 9/11 that something that came out of 9/11 that's going to benefit the family members down in Florida.
That's really good to hear. You know, we've been seeing now over the weekend documents that have been sort of unveiled to the public that have been floating around for a few years that show a variety of problems with the structure of the building dating back to at least 2018. What can you tell us about, you know, the 2018 report or anything else that you've seen about the structure? What does it reveal to you?
Well, you know, the National Construction Safety Team, which is on site now, going to be looking at a lot of things. Certainly that report you just mentioned. The video is incredibly important, I believe, for the investigation because it shows the sequence of how the structure fell. They're going to look through every single document that exists. They're actually going to collect evidence, of course, to see if the specifications are met in terms of the concrete, the steel reinforcing bars. All those kind of things, everything will be on the plate to basically be looked at and to be thoroughly analyzed. And of course, at the end of the day, the construction safety teams will come up with the likely hypothesis of how this building collapsed. And more importantly, even particularly for the family members, is what recommendations will they make to prevent this from happening again in the future.
Yeah. You know, that 2018 report, I think sort of the first nugget that came out about that was that the building had been sinking over a few years. And, you know, part of the thing with some of these sort of condo boards is that they're just made up of other residents. You're not necessarily an expert in building construction. I'm curious, when you hear that an apartment building has been sinking, does that raise alarms? Or maybe that's something that kind of normally happens, that, you know, buildings settle over time and there is an expectation that there would be some sinking?
Yeah, I think certainly the report highlights a specific problem there at the site and apparently other areas around there along the shore. It's certainly something that needs to be looked at. I mean, buildings do settle, right? They settle into the ground. The question is how much, and is it all uniform? Does part of the building does part of the building settle more than another, which can create problems structurally? So all these kind of things are definitely going to be looked at in that report. And we might find even more reports, other indicators that will help us pinpoint exactly what happened here. So
you just mentioned that video that's been, you know, floating around of the collapse is going to be really important. The New York Times reports that some experts who have examined the video of the collapse believe that it may have started from the bottom of the building. What are your thoughts after reviewing some of that video? Yeah, I think that's probably the case here. And again, what's also important is the sequence of the collapse. So you'll notice that one area of the building starts to collapse before the other area does. So that's going to help sort of pinpoint where things were happening. And of course, at least in my estimation, we won't know for a while because the information that we need in terms of the evidence left behind is going to be at the bottom of the pile, unfortunately. And that's where I think we'll find real indicators of what happened here once the rescue and recovery efforts have been completed. You've heard experts say that the building pancaked, that the floors pancaked on top of each other. What is it about how the building fell that makes it more difficult for rescuers to search for survivors? And I guess, like, what is the strategy when you're trying to sort of tackle a building that has fallen in this manner? Yeah, we have to remember that this is a very large building compared to things, for example, that were in Haiti. This is a 13-story building that, as you mentioned, pancakes. So basically, the floors all came down as a stack onto the ground. That is incredible. That amount of material and the size is incredibly difficult to access. Of course, the pile is unstable, as we've heard many times, and so
this is an effort in trying to find the most likely places where there might be survivors in that pile, unfortunately. And again, at the end of the day, these are the teams that we've relied on for decades now. These are well-experienced people who are really on top of this and attempting to find the loved ones, of course, that people are looking for. So unfortunately, like I said, this is going to take some time to do this. It's just a massive effort. But it's done in a way that's methodical and again, trying to make sure that if there are survivors, they don't injure or kill them in the process of trying to remove this material. So it's an incredibly difficult situation. I'm hoping that, of course, that we'll find some survivors, but as time goes on, as we know, it's less likely at this point. So.
Yeah. Yep, it is a search and rescue operation. It's an investigation into the infrastructure and the engineering of that building, and it also might very possibly be a crime scene. So, all of that has to be taken into account as they go through what is left of the building. Glenn Corbett,
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Emily.